Universes Beyond is back, and just like the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, we're uncovering ancient and powerful icons of the past. But unlike Alcazaz and Ojurtaj, we're not diving into deep caves to find this old god. Instead, we're going to my parents' house to ask if they have my old box of PlayStation games, because Tomb Raider's here and brings some decent power in her secret lair drop. It's been a few days since this drop was announced, and me and the boys have been scraping EDH, Rex, Scryfall, and even Reddit, trying to figure out how to make this deck work. After hours of research, we came up with a deck that I think is going to be very functional and very lore friendly. Let's jump into it. As I considered building Lara Croft the Tomb Raider, I knew I wanted to be as flavorful with her as possible. And the problem with that is, I have very little recent knowledge of anything Tomb Raider related. The last Tomb Raider I actually played was Tomb Raider Underworld, and well...
I'm very pleased to see you again, Lara.
I don't think that game has a lot to do with how Lara Croft is being portrayed nowadays, to say the least. So I needed a little bit of a refresher on her lore and who Lara Croft really was. So I ended up watching videos by The Leaderboard, Josh Strife Hayes, Story Mode. I even ended up watching the new Tomb Raider anime trailer thing for Netflix, which looks kind of good, not gonna lie. I did a lot of research on her so I could have a better understanding of who she was and how I could build this card, and if the card was even really on flavor for Lara Croft. And the conclusion I ended up coming to was, yeah, kinda. I'm going to jump into a several second explanation for each card in the Lara Croft Secret Lair drop, including Lara herself, and there will be spoilers for... If you plan on playing the reboots especially, maybe skip to the time code on screen now, because I'm going to be talking a lot about all things Tomb Raider. If you just want the cards, you just want to know about the cards, that timestamp will help you out immensely. So who is Lara Croft? Well, she's the last surviving member of the Croft family. She's an archaeologist and a treasure hunter. She's a lot like Nathan Drake for girls. In most of her games, she's attempted to go on a regular archaeological hunt and ends up in some mystical magical place, not unlike Ixalan from Magic the Gathering. She wields 2 pistols and she's a total badass. By the way, off topic, I really love that Lara Croft's, what does she shoot? Are they Berettas? Okay, so I just looked up what Lara Croft's guns are. We have Heckler & Koch USP handguns in Magic the Gathering now, and I just think that's fantastic. So how does her card stack up to who Lara Croft is? Well, I think it does a pretty good job. We have green-blue for her love of exploration, and red for her rage, which is most seen in her newer games. First Strike and Reach are pretty good abilities for her. I mean, she definitely is going to hit you before you hit her, and she can definitely hit things in the air with her Heckler & Koch USPs. An above average power and toughness to show that she's stronger than the average human, and her type line being Human Ranger makes a lot of sense. She is a human, and she definitely has the experience and temperament of a ranger. Her 2 unique abilities I think are absolutely perfect for who she is. She loves to go into tombs and raid legendary lands. She grabs legendary artifacts and she takes them for herself. I think that's fantastic. And her ability to get paid for doing damage to things, I mean, that's kind of what she's all about. Unfortunately, she just loves to fight and cause destruction, and she gets paid for it, and this is perfect. As far as her artwork goes, this one's kind of interesting because I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I'm 70-30, right? I'm pretty sure it's the new Lara Croft reboot, but as we'll talk about some of the other cards in the Secret Lair, not everything references the new Lara Croft. Some of it references some fairly obscure Lara Croft stuff. So I'm going to say it's the new Survivor Lara Croft, but it could very well be Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition Lara Croft. Alright, let's talk about the other cards in the Secret Lair top. First we got Anger of the Gods, which is Storms of Yamatai. So the Storms of Yamatai were featured in Tomb Raider 2013, or the Tomb Raider reboot, and it was the storm that the gods called upon Lara Croft and her crew when they were trying to escape on the ship known as the Endurance, which is featured in the artwork. I think this is a very cool and flavorful callback to Lara's past. It's also a decent board wipe for commanders, so it's great we can actually use it in the deck. Alright, next we got Kazette, the Sunken City as Academy Ruins. This is the location for the MacGuffin in Tomb Raider 2013 that supposedly gave immortality. Another flavor win and a very useful card for the 99. So then we got the Bow of Nylea as the Grim Whisper, which I think is one of the coolest cards in this Secret Lair drop. This featured in Rise of the Tomb Raider and was Lara's signature weapon in that game. It was an endgame weapon that you had to go around and find all the pieces for, and it was very powerful. The most powerful bow in the game, to my understanding. Then we got Totek Spear as the Shadow Spear. Now this one's really interesting. This one's not from the new rebooted timeline. This one's from Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light and was her primary weapon if you were playing single player, or your co-op player's weapon if they were playing co-op. It's supposedly very, very strong, and Shadow Sphere is a good reprint for it. Then we have my favorite card from the Secret Lair drop. That's going to be Search for Escanta. It's actually called Heart of the Explorer as the reskin, and it depicts Lara Croft entering the Lost Valley, which is really, really cool. The backside becomes Escanta, the Sunken Ruin, as you know, but then it turns into the Lost Valley and depicts that iconic fight between Lara Croft and the T-Rex, and I think this is one of my favorite cards. I really wish I could put it in more decks. I don't play a lot of decks that would actually need this card. Hey, Editor Curry here. Guess what? I forgot. I'm pretty stupid. I actually have an entire Mimeoplasm Commander deck with both Mimeoplasm signed. A Mimeoplasm playmat that is also signed. That Search for Escanta is already in, so I guess I already have home for this, and I forgot. Back to the video. But I think this card is a flavor win. It absolutely goes in this deck. It mills this cards. It just does everything you want to do. Hey, real quick, I'm going to say something dumb for the people who skip forward. Don't be jarred. And yeah, that's why my dad still eats all the vegetables off my plate for me when we go to Olive Garden. Alright, so that's how her lore connects to these 6 cards. Now let's connect these 6 cards to 94 more and make a commander deck, why don't we? So when I look at this commander, the first thing I think is the same thing I think everyone thinks. Gee, Lara Croft has lost some weight, huh? The first thing I think is that this will be an awesome mill commander. This is a teamer commander, but the blue really seems to scream at you that we want to mill ourselves. The effects make you want to mill yourselves and mill your opponents and find some powerful legendaries to mill back on board. As I began to construct this deck, I noticed more and more how unfocused Lara Croft feels. It asks a lot for you in colors that don't feel up to this task. The problem with Lara Croft is that she's a teamer commander, and the effects that she has and what she really wants to do in the deck feels more like an Esper, Dimir, or even Golgari type thing. It doesn't feel like Teamer is fully equipped to handle this, and her effect is so specific, that being legendary lands and legendary artifacts, that it really crimps what you can do with this commander. To solve this problem, I went through EDHREC's theme section and sorted through each color and found what stuck out to me and added it to a list. I did this for the mill theme, legendaries theme, artifacts theme, lands theme, and reanimator. And I even stuck my head into the equipment theme to see if anything would be of use. And I ended up with a large pile of cards that were sort of synergistic. Another problem you're quickly going to notice with Lara Croft is that she's not really a good reanimator commander. She can let you recast things from your graveyard, but at no discount, and she doesn't make it any easier. She just gives you the ability to do it again. Black gives you discounts, or white just puts it straight to the field, but you're using a separate spell for it, so it's just a discount. But this just puts it in the graveyard and says you can recast it. It feels a lot like the Chun-Li card that came out recently. Like, she allowed you to replicate your instants and sorceries, but you still have to pay for them, which feels weird. I'm not trying to be greedy, but it feels like she should give you some sort of discount or some sort of help. And she kind of does, as she does create treasures, but that's just not enough for really impactful spells most of the time. So I had to come up with a solution to this problem, and I came to the realization that Reanimator is probably not something that we're going to be able to do efficiently, and combat is where we're going to need to be in this deck. Luckily, there's a lot of really good red combat cards, and green. Like Bear Umbra is a card that exists, and I don't know why it took me so long to remember that card existed. We don't have to specifically build off Lara's ability to stay in flavor. So I filled the deck with a lot of equipment that would help with combat. I filled it with some combo pieces, some classics, and as much flavor as I could put in while still making a functional deck, which turned out to be a lot harder than you'd think. But after 10 minutes of preamble and build up, may I present to you my list: Lara Croft, Combat Raider. So before we jump into the rest of the list, let's start with our commander, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. Lara Croft Tomb Raider is a green, a blue, and a red, so teamer colors for a legendary creature, human ranger, with a power of 3 and a toughness of 4. She has first strike and reach, and whenever Lara Croft attacks, exile up to 1 target legendary artifact card or legendary land card from a graveyard and put a discovery counter on. You may play a card from exile with a discovery counter on it this turn. Then she has her named ability, Raid. At the end of combat on your turn, if you attack this turn, create a treasure token. So once again, she's going to give us access to some of the things in our graveyard, and she's going to ramp us. She's an all-around solid commander, it's just weird colors. But how are we going to help her be less weird? Well, first of all, she can't get back instants and sorceries, which kind of sucks, so we need some cards that are going to put things in our graveyard but still give us access to those instants and sorceries. And for that, I'm going to look at Phoenix and Pioneer as an example and use cards like Charter Course and Pieces of the Puzzle. Putting cards in the graveyard but still hitting our land drops or making sure we're mana fixing properly is still really important, so cards like Mulch and Grapple with the Past and cards like that are going to be the most useful cards for that kind of fixing. Cards like Faithless Looting and Frantic Search are going to give us general card selection so that we can kind of always have what we need in our hand. And cards like Jace's Archivist and Windfall are going to be able to reset our hands and put more things in the graveyard for us. Okay, so we put some cards in the graveyard, but how do we make use of them? Well, besides our commander, we have cards like Emery, Lurker of their Lock, and Felden of the Third Path to take advantage of some of the artifacts. And we have cards like Crucible of Worlds and Titania, Voice of Gaia, to take advantage of some of the lands that hit the graveyard. As far as land ramp goes, we have classics like Farseek and Rampant Growth, but we're also running cards like Harrow and Springbloom Druid so we can sack some of our lands and get more lands out of our deck. As far as card draw that meshes well with our commander, we added cards like Reki, History of Kamigawa, and Jorah, Leatherlight Captain, so when those artifacts that we're going to be focusing on hit the battlefield, we can draw some cards. And what artifacts are we looking for most? Well, we're looking for artifacts like the Reaver Cleaver, Eska's Chariot, the Hammer of Nazan, Helm of the Host, and Kaldra Complete. We want these cards because they're not only just artifacts, and most of them are equipment, but they are also legendary. So they'll trigger Reki, they'll trigger Jorah, and we'll be able to get most of them back with our commander using her ability if we have to. Again, we have to look at our commander's ability as an additional add-on and not something we can heavily focus on because she does not give a major discount for doing her thing. But anytime she does get the opportunity to do her thing, we want to support that to the best of our abilities. So we're going to run cards like Faldorn, Dread Wolf Herald, because whenever we cast a spell from exile, we'll get a creature, which is at least some benefit. And we'll also be able to get some card advantage by impulsively drawing with her ability. I've been explaining this deck as though we're going to win the game through graveyard combos, but we're really not. That's just going to be little bits of value for us that we can access through our commander. We're really winning this game through combat, so we're going to use cards like Shadow Spear and Hammer of Perforos to get us some combat advantage, and hopefully just start punching through our opponents. Brutaclad, Tech Lore Engineer is also going to be very vital to us winning this game, as it's something we can actually get back with Lara Croft. It's a creature and it gives us combat advantage every turn. Cards like Marag, Fury of Akum, and Aggravated Assault are going to get us some extra combat steps so we can get more of those combat triggers every turn and hopefully get ahead of our opponents. And if we're going to run Aggravated Assault, we might as well run Sword of Feast and Famine since we're sort of an equipment deck, and Bear Umbra so that we can go infinite if the opportunity presents itself. And now before I go on to the lands, I want to talk about two more cards, Brass Squire and Godo Bandit Warlord. So Brass Squire is an interesting creature. I run it in decks that run equipment but aren't solely equipment decks, as it allows an auto equip to any creature. It's pretty good for that, especially with cards like Kaldra Complete and Helm of the Host, which have really high equipped costs. And because I was going to run Helm of the Host anyway, I'm going to run Godo Bandit Warlord because it does go infinite with Helm of the Host, and sometimes you just need to close out a game, right? So as far as lands go, we are running several legendary lands that we can get back with our commander's ability, but as you begin to build this deck, you'll realize that not all lands are really great for your commander, especially the legendary ones. There are only so many that are very, very good. Some of those being Gaia's Cradle, obviously. Otawara is also really good. You've got Beseiju, Rivendell, Academy Ruins, which comes with the Secret Lair, is also fantastic. But really, legendary lands really shouldn't be the focus of this deck because this isn't really meant to handle it. But really here, I've hit the main strategies of the deck. I don't want to repeat myself too much by saying Goblin Welder is very useful, like Felden or Third Path is useful, things like that. But the full list will be in the description, and we're going to talk about some alternate ways you could probably build this deck if you really wanted to. Whoa, new shirt, what's happened? Is this new day? Is this a new person? Who is this guy? Nah, guys, it's still me. It's still just me. Yeah, it's been like 2 days. I've been editing and remaking this video, and this is the final part, so I just want to throw this out there real quick. I understand that this deck can be built in a myriad of different ways. One of the ways you might build it is just a straight landfall deck with a slightly subpar landfall commander. You could build it as a straight artifact deck with a slightly subpar equipment commander. It can do a lot of different things, but not great. It's not very focused. Now, the attacking and getting the treasure is kind of why I focused on the extra combat steps as much as I did, because that's kind of a direction that the deck seems to want to go in. I'm sure one of you could build it better, and I would love to see your list in the comments. Please drop your Moxfield, Architect, or whatever other links in the comments, because I'm highly curious about how you would build this deck. But I really wanted to focus on flavor and trying to make this as cohesive and lore accurate to Lara Croft as possible. It's why I threw in a lot of the lands I threw in, or the creatures I threw in. It just kind of felt like Lara Croft, right? But that's really about it. That's as much as I want to say on this deck. I am super excited for this Secret Lair to drop. I'll be picking one up the day it does, and I will do an opening as soon as it reaches me. But yeah, thanks for watching. I really appreciate you guys, and have a fantastic day.